Welcome to class with Miss Cristine. I teach creative writing. Today's class is called Blackout Poetry. It's kind of what it sounds like. Ultimately, you're going to create something that looks like this. This one's not the prettiest example, but I bet it's an unusual poem that you're seeing. Okay, before we do this assignment, we're going to read some examples of poetry that go along with blackout poetry. The cool thing about writing a blackout poem is that you're not actually writing. So if you don't love writing or you're new to creative writing, this is a really good place to start because you're not actually creating your own lines of poetry. You're not writing. You're creating poetry out of a found object, out of something that already exists. So for today, you need a newspaper article, or even some old magazines, or even some old homework for English class that you don't need anymore, maybe from last year. And other than that, you just need some markers. You probably want a dark color because really the point is to black out what you don't want in your poem. I'll explain more about that later. But right now, I'm going to read to you some poetry that I think goes along really well with blackout poetry. Obviously, when you're using a marker to black out text that you don't want, the poem is not going to have the same grammar or fluidity as a poem that you might be writing from scratch, right? Might sound a little disjointed. Well, I'm going to read you some poetry from one of my favorite poets named Sappho, just so you understand that, not all poetry has to sound like a short story or something. It can sound kind of disjointed and almost a little ambiguous or abstract and still sound like a really good poem. Now, I chose this book. It's called If Not Winter. It's by Sappho. The book is translated, the Sappho, which she wrote in ancient Greek. It's translated by a poet named Anne Carson, who I really love. Now, the cool thing about Sappho is that not all of her works still survive to this day. She lived in ancient Greece on an island called Lesbos, and most of her work, I think, was oral, like people spoke her poetry, they recited her poetry, they sang her poetry. It wasn't necessarily in books, so most of it is lost. Some of it survived on papyrus. Now, papyrus is the kind of paper they used back then, like so many years ago. So it's really cool that some of these poems exist at all. So here's the book. I'm going to just read you some poetry as an example of what some abstract poetry can sound like. So, because only parts of her poems survived on little bits of paper, on little bits of papyrus, the poems are incomplete, but they still survive as poems. Even though they're not complete, they can be really cool sounding. So, let me read you a couple. Deathless Aphrodite of the spangled mind, child of Zeus who twists lures, I beg you, do not break with hard pains. O lady, my heart, but come here if ever before you caught my voice far off, and listening left your father's golden house and came, yoking your car. And fine birds brought you, quick sparrows over the black earth, whipping their wings down the sky through midair, they arrived. But you, O blessed one, smiling in your deathless face, and asked what, now again I have suffered, and why, now again I am calling out, and what I want to happen most of all in my crazy heart. Whom should I persuade, now again, to lead you back into our love? Who, O Sappho, is wronging you? For if she flees, soon she will pursue. If she refuses gifts, rather will she give them. If she does not love, soon she will love even unwilling. Come to me now, loose me from hard care, and all my heart longs to accomplish. You be my ally. So let me just show you what her poems kind of look like now. So all those brackets that you see are what's missing. So the papyrus that did not survive. So this one says, so, blank, 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 go, so we may see, blank, blank, lady of gold arms, blank, 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 do. So go, so we may see, lady of gold arms, do. So even with all that missing, just a few key words, golden arms, doom, can kind of lend a tone or atmosphere to the poem. You kind of can tell what's going on even if you don't have the whole picture. Now, the same is true with a blackout poem, which you're going to write today. All you need is like a newspaper article, some old English homework, anything with words, anything with text, and you need some markers. So you can underline or lightly circle what words you want to keep in your poem. So let's say you're reading a scientific article and you kind of don't think the science language belongs in the poem. You take out words like mitosis and you take out words like nucleus and mitochondria, but you might want to keep words that appeal to you, like light or halving or microscope or whatever. So you focus on the words that you want to keep. You kind of underline them or circle them, and then you just black out everything else around it with a marker. And then you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Now, I also suggest that you just Google blackout poems because there's some really cool images of what people did. So this was just a piece of paper I had lying around my house, and I used it to make a blackout poem. I blacked out everything I didn't want in my poem, and I was left with the words that I wanted in my poem. Let me read my blackout poem to you. Or out of body, today's newspaper, notice the date, heavy, slowly and steadily, a picture, and imagine letting fear go, evaporating along with each breath. Trace your hands against your own presence in the world. If you are feeling, change how you're positioned. Pay attention to the right here and now. Hot or cold. Notice opposites and breathe. Use distractions. Use your name or pick up a paragraph you find out loud. Look at yourself. Smile. How does that? What can you? If thoughts, later, but let them go. Enough as it is. Start to notice it makes a difference, letting the things out. Notice the sensations of the water. Name the items around you. Imagine yourself in a familiar place. Feel the something. Laugh. Anything can break that. So powerful, the things in your life. Put the list where you'll see it and remember. Think about remember how it felt. What was different? What can change? So those are all the words that were left behind. And I blacked out with a marker all the words I didn't want in my poem. But you can see how it sounds really cool. And it doesn't flow in like complete sentences. You don't need complete sentences for poetry. Sometimes poetry is about what you leave out. Okay? It's about veiling true meaning and just saying a little less. So I think sometimes people think that poetry is about just saying, I love you to the moon and back, you're the best. But you can sometimes convey more emotion by showing a little bit of restraint. And I think this is a really fun way to experiment with poetry if you're new to it, or if you love poetry and you want to play around with this new form that you might not have seen before. And this is a great way to kill some time and go around your house looking for old newspapers and magazines, and all you need is a marker to create a million new poems. Now, just because you didn't write the words doesn't mean that these poems aren't yours. If writing is all about the order you put words in, and if you create a new order for these words, a new structure, they're your poems. If you love the poem so much, you can take the poems out of these Blackout Poems and type them up and see what they look like that way. Thanks for joining. I'm Miss Cristine. This video is for Community Works, and wherever you are, hello, I hope you're safe and happy and healthy, and I hope you enjoy writing a Blackout poem. See you next week. Bye.